Right.
Hey, everybody, welcome to Scary Saturdays with Kyle. And today we're talking about a film that I've been kind of looking forward to watching because it's been on the video nasty list for a long time. Not accidentally, I got a copy of this film sent to me just about a month ago, and I've been really meaning to check out this John Saxon cannibal film. The film is called Cannibal Apocalypse. It was also released under Invasion of the Flesh Hunters, or, according to IMDb, Cannibal in the Streets. Which makes me wonder what they are in the sheets. But the film follows following a tour of duty in Vietnam. Norman Hopper, who's played by John Saxon, is just kind of trying to return to a normal life, but then he discovers that the other people who came back with him may have contracted a virus that causes to want to eat the flesh of the living. You know, something that happens to all of us from time to time.
Insatiable appetite.
Yeah, so John Saxon reportedly was very upset to find out this was a cannibal film. He received a version of the script that was very poorly translated and really had a focus on the Vietnam War part and the recovery from the Vietnam War. And he thought it was a really interesting character piece. When he got to set and he started seeing all of the body parts that were being carted around and the makeup effects and being told that he has to chew on a lady's arm, he reportedly went to his trailer and refused to come out for a while, almost quitting the film. And he's actually, the rest of his life, reportedly never saw Cannibal Apocalypse all the way through, which is unfortunate because I actually think it's pretty solid. Okay. I think what it does get right about kind of coming back, the PTSD from coming back from a tour of duty, and how that actually relates to the virus that we carry, is interesting. It's not one of those films that would win Oscars for doing it, but I really appreciate director Antonio Margheriti and what he brought to the table with kind of juxtaposing the idea of PTSD with cannibalism. You know, it's one of those weird things I would never have thought of comparing the two, but I'm really glad he did. If you recognize that name, Antonio Margheriti, he directed Castle of Blood, as well as the underrated Western And God Said to Cain, which was recently released by Arrow Video on a really nice Blu-ray set. You can also recognize the name Antonio Margheriti because there's a joke about him in Inglourious Bastards, the film that Quentin Tarantino directed. The film doesn't have a lot of other major characters other than John Saxon, except it does have Giovanni Lombardo Radici, who, if you're a fan of Italian horror, is in a ton of different stuff. But he also was in some major films. He appeared in Gangs of New York, as well as the Omen remake. So he's done a lot in Italian horror, and he's done quite a few appearances in American horror as well. And he plays Charlie Bukowski, who is the other returning Vietnam vet. I think those two guys, John Saxon and him, have some pretty solid chemistry for what they're asked to do. There's a great scene at the beginning of the film where Bukowski closes himself up inside of a store and basically holds himself within a hostage situation as an active shooter. And it reminded me a lot of First Blood and the ending of that film where Rambo's character kind of holds up inside that store as well. Funny thing is, this actually happened 2 years before First Blood. So a lot of people think that this ripped off First Blood, but it came out beforehand. Right. And I find that very captivating. But there's a really interesting playoff of the fact that Norman, John Saxon's character, is just trying to rescue his friend and get his friend out of this horrible situation. And little does he know that he is going to be eventually suffering from the same viral issue that his friend did. There's a wild scene where his friend Charlie Bukowski is in a movie theater and he realizes he's taking part in this cannibalistic virus because he's watching a horror movie up on the big screen. There's two people aggressively making out. I've never seen a topless woman gyrating in a makeout session before, but he decides to bite her in the middle of this scene. And it's one of those things that could only exist in Italian horror. We saw something similar to it in like the New York Ripper, for example.
Right, yeah.
During that live sex show thing that was going on in that film.
Awkward.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's a charm of the style of film, one that I wouldn't put in my film, but God love Antonio Margheriti for doing the same thing. The film was written by Margheriti and Dardano Sacchetti. If you don't know Dardano Sacchetti, he wrote a number of Italian horror films, but was also very well known for doing Amityville 2, the prequel to the original Amityville Horror, which is a very Italian horror-esque sequel prequel. I really enjoyed this movie, though. I won't say that it's my favorite of the Italian horror. I won't say it's my favorite of the video nasties, but for what it's actually doing as far as the nasties, I'm actually surprised it got prosecuted because there's some graphic violence in it, but nowhere near the level that we'd see in films like Zombie, Tenebrae, the New York Ripper, as I mentioned before. The film is a little bit more laid back. There's just some cannibalistic moments that I could see kind of shocking some people. But overall, I enjoyed this movie. I enjoyed the parable that he was trying to tell. He's not all the way successful with it, but if you're looking for a horror film that kind of subverts what you're thinking and at least tries to do something unique with a cannibal story, which is something that we saw way too many times in the early 80s, I think Cannibal Apocalypse aka Invasion of the Flesh Hunters, aka Cannibal in the Streets, is right for you. Thank you guys for joining me for this episode of Scary Saturdays with Kyle. Next week we're going to be covering kind of a... I'm crossing over to Nick's realm next week, and I'm going to be covering Fallen as a Scary Movie Saturdays with Kyle, 90s with Nick episode. So join me for that next time.